Japanese cities are often seen as some of the best examples of city planning in the world. Streets, trains, and neighborhoods are designed in ways that balance efficiency, safety, and everyday convenience. In this section, we will break down what makes these cities work so well, from their reliable public transit systems to the way local neighborhoods are built for people, not just cars. If Japanese cities show us what strong design looks like, then it also makes sense to look at the opposite. Around the world, many cities struggle because their basic structure was planned in a way that makes daily life harder instead of easier. These are the cities that feel disconnected, where it's difficult to walk, where public spaces are missing, and where people depend almost completely on cars. A big reason behind this comes down to two things: how zoning is handled and how density is managed. In many cities, zoning rules separate everything into strict categories. Homes are put in one area, shops in another, and offices somewhere else. On paper, this looks organized, but in reality, it forces people to travel long distances for the most basic needs. You might need to drive to a grocery store because it's far away from your neighborhood. Children may not be able to safely walk to school because schools are built in separate zones. This type of single-use zoning spreads out the city in ways that make it less connected and more tiring to live in. Density adds to the problem when it's used poorly. Low-density neighborhoods, often filled only with houses and empty roads, create long commutes and high infrastructure costs. Services like buses and trains cannot run efficiently when there are too few people living in an area, so residents end up relying on cars even more. At the same time, poorly planned high-density areas can also fail if they do not include enough parks, sidewalks, or local shops. In both cases, the lack of balance means the city does not feel built for daily human life. This is very different from Japanese cities, where zoning rules are more flexible and density is layered in practical ways. In Japan, it's common to find small shops, restaurants, and homes sharing the same neighborhood block. Train stations often anchor entire districts with housing, markets, and services within walking distance. Instead of separating functions, the design pulls them together. This keeps streets active, makes walking safe and convenient, and allows transit to serve more people in less space. Another important part of city design comes down to how the core of the city is built around transportation. This is where the difference between well-designed cities and poorly designed ones becomes even clearer. Many cities that struggle today were built around a car instead of transit. Their downtowns often center on wide roads, highways, and large parking lots. Offices and stores may be in the center, but people are expected to drive in and out every day. This creates heavy traffic, pollution, and long commutes. It also leaves very little room for people to walk, gather, or enjoy public spaces. When a city's core is planned only for cars, it often feels empty after work hours because there are no homes, shops, or safe sidewalks to keep the area alive. A transit-first core works in the exact opposite way. Instead of centering on cars, it places trains, subways, and buses at the heart of the city. Streets are designed to move people instead of vehicles. This means sidewalks are wider, crossings are safer, and stations connect directly to shopping areas, offices, and housing. Transit-first cores reduce the need for long drives, make trips more predictable, and allow more people to access the center of the city without owning a car. Japanese cities show this clearly. In Tokyo, for example, major train stations like Shinjuku or Shibuya are not just stops along a line. They're entire hubs of activity. Offices, restaurants, and stores are layered right above or next to the station. Thousands of people can move in and out without ever needing to drive. Even smaller cities in Japan follow this same pattern. The station becomes the anchor of the city, pulling life toward it and keeping the center active throughout the day and night. Cities that miss this step often end up with weak centers. Without transit-first planning, downtowns become harder to reach, less welcoming to pedestrians, and less connected to the neighborhoods around them. This is why building around transit is more than just a transport issue. It decides whether a city core feels alive and accessible, or empty and difficult to use. But even when transit works well, the smaller details of how people move inside the neighborhoods matter just as much. This is where walkability and street design become critical. Cities that ignore these elements often end up feeling uncomfortable and unsafe for daily life. In many poorly designed cities, neighborhoods are dominated by wide roads built mainly for cars. These streets encourage fast driving, which makes walking unsafe and unpleasant. Sidewalks, if they exist, are often narrow, broken, or placed right next to heavy traffic. Crossings are spread far apart, forcing people to walk longer distances just to reach simple destinations. Over time, this reduces how much people walk and increases their reliance on cars, even for short trips. Streets that should connect people end up dividing them. Walkability is not just about adding sidewalks, it's about creating an environment where people can comfortably move on foot. This includes shorter blocks, safe crossings, clear signage, and streets that are scaled to human activity instead of vehicles. When these details are missing, neighborhoods feel empty and disconnected. Shops and local services struggle because fewer people are passing by on foot, and public spaces lose their sense of community. Japanese cities highlight the opposite approach. Narrow streets, often only wide enough for small cars or bicycles, are common in both large and small cities. These streets naturally slow down traffic, making them safer for pedestrians. Many of them double as social spaces where neighbors interact, children play, and small businesses thrive. Walking feels natural because destinations are close together and designed to be reached on foot. Another key feature is the way narrow streets connect directly to transit and commercial areas. A short walk can take someone from their home, through a small local street, and into a bustling shopping area or a train station. This layered design creates continuous flow of activity without the gaps and dead zones often found in car-centered cities. When walkability and narrow street design are missing, cities become harder to live in on a daily level. By comparing these approaches, it becomes clear that the scale of streets is just as important as the large planning decisions. Streets designed for people, not just for vehicles, are what keep neighborhoods active, safe, and connected. But beyond how streets are built, there's another layer of city design that decides whether a place can even survive in the long run: infrastructure that can withstand disasters. For countries like Japan, where earthquakes are a constant risk, this factor is built directly into how cities are planned and maintained. Many other cities around the world, however, lack this level of preparation, and it shows in the damage that occurs when disaster strikes. Poorly designed cities often treat infrastructure as something to be built cheaply and quickly, without long-term durability in mind. Roads, bridges, and buildings may follow basic standards, but not much beyond that. In earthquake-prone regions, this can be especially dangerous. Weak foundations, outdated construction methods, and lack of enforcement in building codes can lead to structures collapsing during even moderate quakes. When a city is not designed with resilience in mind, the result is not only physical destruction, but also long-term economic and social disruption. Japan takes the opposite approach. After major earthquakes in its history, the country has continuously adapted its building codes and infrastructure standards. Skyscrapers in Tokyo and Osaka are built with advanced shock-absorbing systems that allow them to sway safely during strong tremors. Residential areas are also guided by strict regulations that ensure houses are reinforced and anchored properly. Bridges, tunnels, and transit lines are regularly inspected and upgraded so they can keep functioning even after a disaster. This attention to detail reduces damage and allows recovery to happen much faster. Another important element is how resilience is planned at the neighborhood level. Open spaces such as parks and school grounds are intentionally integrated into urban areas, serving as evacuation points during emergencies. Utility systems, including water and electricity, are often designed with backup capacity to restore service quickly. This combination of structural strength and community-level planning shows how deeply resilience is tied into Japanese city design. When cities fail to plan for natural risks, they create environments that can collapse under pressure, both literally and socially. By studying Japan's earthquake-resilient infrastructure, it becomes clear that strong design is not only about daily convenience, but also about long-term survival. Meanwhile, survival alone does not make a city livable. Another core difference between well-planned cities and poorly designed ones is how much people depend on cars to move around. Many cities around the world are shaped almost entirely around driving, while Japanese cities show that minimal car dependency creates more efficient and more comfortable daily life. Car cities are often spread out with wide roads, large parking lots, and zoning that separates homes from shops and workplaces. This layout forces people to drive for nearly every need, even when the distance is short. The results are predictable: traffic congestion, air pollution, and higher household costs for owning and maintaining vehicles. Public transit struggles in these areas because routes are long and passengers are too spread out. For people who cannot drive, such as the elderly or children, these environments can feel isolating and unsafe. Japanese cities demonstrate the opposite approach. Instead of requiring cars for most trips, they design neighborhoods and transit systems so that walking, cycling, and public transport are the default. Train stations are positioned close to residential areas, and each station becomes a hub filled with shops, services, and workplaces. This means that many daily needs can be met within a short walk or a quick ride, without ever needing a car. Another important factor is the way narrow streets and compact block layouts naturally discourage heavy car use. Driving is possible, but it's often slower and less convenient than walking or taking a train. Parking is limited and expensive, further reducing the pressure for widespread car ownership. This design creates an environment where cars are only used when truly necessary, not as the main tool for everyday movement. The result is a city that feels more human in scale. Streets are quieter and safer, local businesses benefit from steady foot traffic, and residents enjoy more freedom of movement regardless of age or income. In contrast, cities that depend heavily on cars lock themselves into a cycle of sprawl, congestion, and rising infrastructure costs. Minimal car dependency shows how planning decisions shape not only how people move, but also how communities function. But another key reason their urban systems function so well comes from the way decisions are made at the local level. Unlike many poorly designed cities that rely heavily on centralized or top-down planning, Japan allows for more local autonomy and decentralized control. This structure shapes how neighborhoods are managed and how cities adapt to changing needs. In many countries, city planning is handled almost entirely by central authorities or large regional governments. This can lead to slow decision-making, one-size-fits-all policies, and little flexibility for specific neighborhoods. The results often show up in poor maintenance, inefficient services, and communities that feel disconnected from the process of shaping their own space. When local governments lack autonomy, urban areas can stagnate because they simply cannot adjust quickly to the everyday needs of their residents. Japanese cities take a different approach. Local wards, municipalities, and neighborhood associations play a strong role in planning and managing urban life. For example, small communities often decide on how local streets are organized, where small parks are added, or how waste management is handled. These decisions are made close to the people who use these services every day, which makes them more practical and responsive. Decentralization also extends to larger planning decisions. Regional governments can set zoning rules, development guidelines, and disaster prevention measures that fit their specific geography and population needs. Instead of one national rulebook being applied everywhere, cities and towns adapt to their own context. This is one reason why Japanese cities, even smaller ones outside of Tokyo, tend to feel well organized and tailored to the people who live there. Poorly designed cities often fail here because their structures are too rigid. Local authorities may not have the power or resources to address issues, and residents feel little connection to how their city is shaped. The result is environments that are not maintained, transit systems that do not match local demand, and communities that cannot build trust in their own surroundings. However, beyond rules and governance, another factor that shapes Japan's urban design is culture itself. Cultural principles directly influence how spaces are planned, how they function, and how people use them in daily life. This is something many poorly designed cities overlook, and they often copy planning models without considering local behavior and values. In cities that ignore culture, urban design can feel disconnected from the people who live there. Large blocks of housing may be built without regard for how residents interact. Public spaces might exist, but they remain underused because they do not match local habits or expectations. When function is designed without cultural understanding, cities end up with environments that look organized on paper, but fail in practice. Japanese cities show the opposite effect. Cultural ideas such as efficiency, harmony, and respect for shared space appear directly in how neighborhoods are built. For example, the concept of ma, which emphasizes the use of space between objects, can be seen in how small streets and courtyards are arranged to feel open, even in dense areas. Narrow alleys lined with small shops or homes are not just practical for walking, they also reflect a cultural preference for closeness and layered activity. Another influence comes from the importance of community and collective responsibility. This is why streets in residential areas often feel clean and safe. Even without heavy policing or strict enforcement, residents take part in maintaining shared spaces, from organizing waste collection to caring for small gardens along sidewalks. This cultural habit of cooperation is built into the function of the city itself, reducing the need for large centralized management. Transit systems also reflect cultural design values. Trains and buses are not only effective, but also orderly, with layouts and schedules designed to minimize conflict and maximize shared use. These systems function well because they match cultural expectations of punctuality, discipline, and collective respect. Overall, when cultural design principles are ignored, cities often feel mismatched with their own people.